Yokoso wa shitare. Welcome back again. And first things first, yes, I have my hair tied back. Yes, I am wearing my glasses. I just was too lazy to put my contacts in, and my hair was getting in my face, so now I've got this look going on, and I think it makes me look more professorial. So, win-win, I guess. Second item of business is this story that we're dealing with today. Technically, in the original document, it's one story that has two smaller stories in it. Now, I'm going to split these stories in two because if I combine them together like it is in the original document, it's going to get really, really long, and I would like to have at least one video that's under 10 minutes, so hopefully with this short story, I can actually get that. With only telling one of the stories, we can actually get it a relatively short video out. So, with all of that being said, we're just gonna jump right into the story. I don't know what this is. So once upon a time, there was a man by the name of Kudara no Nariwara. A man by the name of Kudara no Kawanari. That's what his name is. Kudara no Kawanari. And here's the thing. If you guys are well educated in the use of kanji and how that all works, you're gonna see this guy's name and think, why is it Kudara? How do you get Kudara from that? Shouldn't it be Hyakusai? But it's old Japanese. It just doesn't make sense some of the time. And what's interesting to know is that Kudara was the name that the Japanese had for an ancient kingdom on the Korean peninsula with which the ancient Japanese actually had a lot of I want to use the term intercourse, but given the connotations of that word, I don't know if that's the most appropriate use of the term, because I know exactly where all your guys' minds are going to go. Although there was probably some of that intercourse, it was more like cultural trading. You know, there was a lot of going back and forth between these two countries, between Japan and Kudara, which was on the southwestern side of the Korean peninsula. Anyway, this guy, Kudara no Kawanari, who may very well have actually been from Kudara, in Korean known as Paekche or Paekche. But anyway, that's beside the point. He was a very prolific painter. There was almost nobody in the realm who could match his skill at painting. It is also said that he was one of the guys who helped erect the stone at Takidono. Takidono being a big fancy building, and I guess there was some famous stone there. Although one of the sources that I read said that it wasn't our guy Kawanari who actually erected the stone, it was a different guy, and Kawanari was just kind of there. But Kawanari did paint the walls of this Takidono. Don't know why that's super relevant other than to establish that this guy's actually a pretty famous dude, but there you go. There's his introduction. But at any rate, one day, Kawanari's just hanging out when one of his page boys, one of his servant boys, specifically the word is Jusha no Warawa, which means like a follower. Jusha means a follower, and Warawa means like child or young boy, young man. But a servant of his escaped. Ran off, decided he didn't want to work here anymore, he didn't like it, and he was going to vanish somewhere out in the ether. Now, before people start getting really confused, I don't think this was particularly the same thing as slavery. It was not slavery. This was a young, employed individual. I don't know how young he was, but it was very common for the nobles of aristocratic ancient Japan to have children, maybe in the realm of like 10, 11, 12. I haven't looked that much into this part of ancient Japanese culture, so forgive me if I'm a little off on some of these details, but they would have kids be their servants. I don't know why. Maybe it was just nicer, it was easier, possibly a really good way for kids to move up in the world, make a name for themselves so that in the future they could have future employment. But at any rate, this employed youngster ran off, just disappeared somewhere out into the middle of the city. Nobody knows where he went. And Kawanari was really put off by this. Like, this sucks. Like, I'm paying this kid to come serve me. He needs to come and do his job. Like, come on, bro. And although he looked all over the place, he looked high, low, east and west is the specific term that they use, he couldn't find the kid. So one day he went to a servant of a noble house. It doesn't mention what the house is. It doesn't mention if it's like the imperial house or just one of the really, really high-ranking officials' house or who it was exactly. But he came to a really high-ranking nobleman's servant. And that's all it says. It says shimobe, which means servant. I don't know in what capacity he was a servant or how it's different from a jusha, but there are all these different versions of servants and butlers and different people who work different job titles. But a shimobe, I believe, is an adult. That's the difference between a warawa and a shimobe. A shimobe is somebody who serves but is an adult. So this was a very skilled individual because obviously the richest people in town are only going to buy the best. But he comes to this servant and he says, "Hey bro, one of my servant boys has just ran off and I have no idea where he is. I need you to go find him and bring him back to me." And this adult servant man, who may have very well been quasi-police warrior type thing, I don't know exactly again, but he just looked at Kawanari and said, "Well, sir, that is actually a very easy thing for me to do. However, there is just one problem. I have no idea what this kid looks like. And how am I supposed to capture him and bring him back to you if I don't know what he looks like? How am I supposed to find him?" And Kawanari just nods his head and says, "You know, you have a really good point," which I don't know why it didn't occur to him to think of this beforehand, but apparently it didn't. So Kawanari, being the exceptional painter that he was, pulled out a piece of scratch paper, just a piece of paper that he had on him, just in his sleeves, because that's where a lot of ancient Japanese people stored stuff, is they had these long billowy sleeves and you could just stick something in your sleeves. I know, because when I was wearing my yukata, that's what I would do, and that's what everybody in all the anime does, so... But he pulls out this scratch paper and gets a random brush and he paints a portrait of this kid. Just his face, just like the bust, and hands it to this servant and tells him, "Find the kid who looks like this. There are 2 marketplaces in the city, one in the east and one in the west. Go to both of them and see if you can't find him." And so this servant guy, this adult servant guy, takes this piece of paper with him and he goes to do exactly that. He goes to the different marketplaces. And there are a lot of people in these marketplaces, let me tell you. At least that's what the story says. And so he's looking around and it's taking a long time. Several hours pass. And just as this servant guy starts thinking, I don't know if I'm going to find him. Maybe I won't be able to find him. Maybe I should just call it a day. As soon as he thinks this, he sees a kid that looks similar to what he remembered on the portrait. And just to double check, he pulls out this portrait, this little painted portrait, and he looks at it, and sure enough, it looks exactly like the kid. It is different by 0, completely the same. And he goes, "Aha, I got him." And that's what he does. He gets the kid, he brings him back to Kawanari, and Kawanari is extremely happy about this because now he has one of his employees back. And quite frankly, I almost wonder if he was a little worried about the kid's safety, because as we have seen, the streets of the ancient capital of Japan weren't always the safest. If you want to know more, please check out the video about Tachibana no Norimitsu. So that was potentially one reason why he actually wanted the kid to come back. But regardless, the kid is back. Everything is great. This is awesome. And here is yet another story extolling the virtues and the skill of somebody who is expert in their craft. That's, if you'll notice, is kind of a running theme of this section of stories. But I also want to point out something. To us nowadays, this may seem a little silly because nowadays we have people who can make perfect portraits of people. How's that for alliteration? Out of macaroni. They'll just find rocks on the road and they'll just put them in a weird order, and lo and behold, we've got a painting to rival the Mona Lisa itself. No, literally, I've seen people draw these fascinating, super detailed portraits out of dust stuck to somebody else's car. So to us, it seems a little bit silly. A guy who's so good at drawing that he can draw a picture that looks like somebody using paper and ink. Duh. But here's the thing you have to remember. Looking at it from a historical perspective, that was not the case. This is one thing that humans have been steadily progressing on and getting really, really good at, is that as time goes on, we are able to do more and more things. If you look at ancient European medieval art, it's pretty crap. It's really not good. In fact, I've seen memes on the internet making fun of it. It's really bad. So when Leonardo da Vinci comes out and he paints his Mona Lisa, which does look like an actual person, it's so good. Now to us nowadays, the Mona Lisa is kind of okay, whatever. See people draw stuff like that all the time. But back then, this was one of the first times somebody drew a portrait so realistically. That's why it's such a big deal. It's not because it just looks nice, it's just because it looks really good, because it was one of the first works that could be so realistic and showcased what human beings could actually achieve. And the same goes in ancient Japan. While I think ancient Japanese art was a little bit better than European medieval art, it, however, had its limits, as you can see in some of these pictures that I'm going to show you right around here somewhere. It's hard to tell individuals apart. Their faces all look the same, partly because they very rarely did anything close up. It was always painting a scene where the camera, as it were, the viewpoint was zoomed out so you could see tons and tons of people. But even then, there wasn't a lot of detail in the faces. So for a man to be able to draw such a convincing, true-to-life picture on scratch paper, that's saying something about that man's skill. But that's actually going to be it for the story. If you notice, it doesn't end with a "thus is it said," because technically this isn't the end of the story. There's another half of this story that involves the same guy and a friend of his, but I'm not going to get into that now. We'll do that one next week. That one is actually a story that I really like, and I'm looking forward to getting to that one. But Thank you for listening. Ito katejike no koso haberi kere. So please feel free to give this video a like if you feel so inclined. And if you like ancient Japanese culture, ancient Japanese stories, or you want to hear more about the language or some of the tales that we have here, please feel free to subscribe. We are slowly working our way up into the world here, but we'll see where this leads. But for now, that's going to be it. Again, I appreciate it very much, and we will see you in the next story when we revisit our boy Kudara no Kawanari. For now, see you later.